Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Craig Peters here from Soundiron, and I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of Soundiron Sessions. And today we're going to be looking at writing a dramatic cue. Now, this is a track that I wrote for Sonespheres 3 Current, which we did in collaboration with composer Blake Ewing. And he did a lot of really awesome sound design for this library, and a lot of it's perfect for dramatic type scoring. So this library pretty much inspired this track. So I'm gonna go and show you guys what I did. I'm gonna show you guys some of the other libraries that I used and a little bit of mixing and mastering stuff as well. So let's check it out and then start digging into it. All right, so this is the track that I wrote. You can hear it's very, has a very emotional kind of sound to it. And like I said, this library just really inspired it. And I mentioned in the walkthrough that there's a lot of sounds in this library that I like to call cue starters. And, I really do mean that. I mean, this whole track basically came from this one patch in the library. And this sound, it's these string samples that Blake used that they're his own samples that he recorded. Pretty much when I loaded up this library and started going and digging through the sounds, this is sort of the first little thing I came up with. And I just love that sound so much. And when I was playing around with it, I knew I was gonna write a track based off of that because I loved it so much. So pretty much, let's just go ahead and start from the top. So I have this track up here. This is just a piano sound that comes with the library. This is the Mariana piano. Some of the names in this library, I'm not gonna even try to pronounce, but they're cool and they have their own unique thing. So pretty much having that sort of initial motif, I knew I wanted that to be a little bit more later on. So when I was writing this track, one of the things I was trying to think of is maybe like if I was scoring for a dramatic movie and there was some scene that was really, really heavy emotional part. So that's kind of what I was trying to keep in mind. So that melodic motif that I just played, I thought this would be more better suited for later on in the track. So I wanted to still kind of play around with the, using some of the notes in it. So what I came up with was this little, just to kind of intro it a little bit, and then starting to bring in some of the chords. So just slowly kind of easing into the track, if it was building. And then I introduced this other sound from the library. Most of the sounds in this track are from Sonespheres 3. And this one's one of the harp sounds. It's a transatlantic harp. And I also put a lot of my own effects on it. Let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys some of the processing that I did. So I got crystallizer on here. I got some black hole. So you can tell I was really going for some ambience, you know, really ambient vibe. So let's just go ahead and just bypass all these so you can hear the sound actually that is coming from the library. But he did a lot of his own sound design, so a lot of this stuff is just very looping, evolving textures, which I really like. So starting from the top, some of the effects that I added using crystallizer from Sound Toys. You can hear it adds this kind of cool gatey effect to it. And then we got some black hole. Add a little bit more atmosphere. And then to add even more atmosphere, you know, got to add some Valhalla shimmer on there. I really like this plugin. It's just, I don't know, it kind of makes anything sound cool, especially if you're going for this kind of stuff. Makes me feel like I'm floating through space. All right, so we got those, and this is just to kind of intro a new sound and, you know, bring a little bit more vibe into it. And then after that, we start to introduce these other sounds, which are the more string textured sounds from the library that I just really love. And what I did with these is pretty much just some EQ, a little bit of EQing just to kind of darken it up a little bit. And then I also have some Valhalla vintage verb on here just to give it a little bit more ambience. So, and what I also did with these two different sounds, I'll go ahead and play you a little bit of it. So we have this first one. This is a little bit more of a higher string sound, and I panned it a little bit more to the left, sort of thinking about it in a traditional orchestral sense. And then I have this other string texture sound that is a little bit more of I think it sounds a little bit more better when played in a lower range. And I have that a little bit more panned to the right, which is kind of where normally like cellos and basses go. So here we go, let's play a little bit of that. And I really love that. I mean, you can use this for even just any kind of underscore in a track just by itself, and I think it sounds great. So let's go ahead and listen to just those two by themselves so you can really sort of hear how they play off of each other, and being that they do a lot of evolving sort of movement. And then let's go ahead and add in the piano. Yeah, I was really happy with how this chord progression came out, how it has this kind of so kind of a little bit more tension, a little bit more sad, and then and I really love how that sounds using those sort of spread triads. It really makes that sort of that really open sound. It has a really beautiful tone to it. And so it's kind of what I had in mind was there's a lot of sad feeling to this track, but at the same time with some of these chord changes, there's sort of that feeling of hope, which is kind of what I was going for. You know, with every bad thing that happens in life, there's always, you know, something positive that can come from it. So that's kind of the vibe I was going for. And then this last part, it's just kind of building and evolving a little bit more. So another thing I want to mention is actually the use of this this sort of sub bass sound. And One of the things I really like about this library is there's a lot of different sort of banks for different tones, like depth, harp, impacts, piano, C beds, like basses and stuff. So this one I wanted to use just to kind of provide a little bit more of a centered low end tone to it, because you have the basses here, the strings here, the piano, and I wanted to add a little bit more weight to it. So I used this sound from the library. And it's actually mapped to the mod wheel. So I'm just kind of layering this underneath, and you can hear it. So like if, let's say I just have the strings and then I'll add in the sub bass, sort of the unearthed bass is what it's called. So you can hear how that sounds. So this is without. So you can hear it kind of adds a little bit of that low end weight to it. And without, it makes such a big difference. Huge difference. Hearing it without it almost just doesn't even feel right to me. And then going down a little bit more, so as the track sort of keeps building, it's still sort of playing the same, the same chord progression and melody, but I wanted to bring in some other elements. So I was trying to think, what are some other elements? And I was like, I could really hear some female vocals on this, so I thought I would use Mimi Page, because I feel like her style kind of really fits this kind of vibe. So I added some of her phrases, and this is how it sounds by itself. Very ambient and ethereal, and I just thought it would be perfect for this. So hearing it in context with the whole track, I'm gonna go ahead and mute the strings. We'll get to the strings here shortly. So I really love how that sounds. She has a very breathy quality to her vocals, and it just kind of melded perfectly. And then I have this other oceanic piano. This is kind of just introducing a little bit more, movement as far as the melodic aspect of the track. Actually, no, I played it up here. So just kind of adding a little bit more melodic movement to the track. I really love the way the pianos sound, and just kind of adds a little bit more space to it. And then I'm also adding some Valhalla shimmer on that as well. There's a lot of reverb in this track, so it's very, very ambient. And then I also have these low impacts. Like I said, the library comes with a lot of these really cool different sounds, whether it's like synths or strings or some more impact sort of things. So that's another one that I'm using for this, just to add a little bit more sort of like that subby hit, just to kind of add even more weight to this track, because it's really sort of, it's kind of heavy. It's kind of heavy emotionally, I think. And so I'm just wanted to kind of emphasize that a little bit more with some different sounds. So this is how it sounds by itself. And I also got some EQ on here, just really scooping out a lot of everything except the low end. So this is how it sounds without the Pro Q on it. Like that could be cool even for some other track where you just want a big sort of exploding hit sound, but when you filter everything out, you just get this just a little bit more low end. It's more you feel it than you hear it, really. So that's kind of what I was using this for. And then let's go ahead and get into the strings. So this is when I started introducing our Hyperion strings elements. And what I'm doing with this is I have a few different instruments that are playing spiccatos and some other ones that are doing some swells. So like for the violins, I have these kind of swelling sounds. And then I have this other violin basically acting as like a violin too almost. And if you look in the space tab, they're both doing something totally different, or they're both in different spaces. So you have one sort of in a more violin 1 position and this one in a more violin 2. And I moved these accordingly. It might not look exactly like an orchestral seating, but I tried to place it more in the stereo field in the place that I felt like it sounded the best. So that's why I'm using this violin spiccato patches sort of like a violin 2. And then I also have these cello swells. And then I have these low-end bass swells. So let's just listen to the strings by themselves. So you have the other strings sort of like swelling and sort of adding that kind of wavy motion. So with the EQing for the strings, I did a little bit of a high pass and a bump in sort of like the low mids, and then around like the mid area, I did a cut, and then I did another cut around the high end, and then in the really top, I sort of boosted it just to add some of that air sound. I dipped this because I want to have it dark, but at the same time, I want to add a little bit of that air sound. So you have to be careful when you EQ strings, sort of where you decide to boost and you know, boost and cut. So I wanted it to have a little bit of a darker sound, but at the same time, I wanted to sort of add a little bit of that air sound to it. And then I'm also using Decapitator on here again. I just really love this on strings. I really feel like it adds a nice sort of like dimension to the strings. And then I have Seventh Heaven Professional, which is a really nice reverb. You've probably seen me use this a few times on the Soundiron Session videos. And I have the Halls, the Boston Hall A. And this just adds sort of that kind of traditional orchestral sound. And then without. So I really like how that sounds. It has a nice sort of traditional orchestral hall tone to it. And then for the mastering, pretty much what I did was I have Goldfoss on here, and I'm just using this to kind of clean up some of the kind of muddiness that might come from the track. It actually does make a pretty big difference. Let me go ahead and bypass it, and then I'll turn it on. So here's off. So you can hear it just kind of subtly opens it up a little bit, which I really like this plugin for. I like to use it just very subtly for things like that. And then I'm using Ozone 9 for pretty much the bulk of my mastering. I have an EQ on here, just doing a little bit of a high pass and a little bit of a low end bump. Slight dip in the mids to low mids, just because I want to, you know, add a little bit more clarity. When you take out some of the mids, sometimes you can kind of open it up a little bit and get that sort of like smiley face EQ curve. And then just another, you know, pretty much a high shelf, you know, just boosting the highs. And this is kind of what I typically do when it comes to mastering. Usually I'll do sort of like a top-down approach where I'll have this kind of in place already and make a lot of my mixing decisions based off of that. But for this, I actually did it afterward, and I feel like it still worked pretty good. And then I have an imager on here. Ozone 9 is really cool because it has a ton of different stuff you can do when it comes to mastering, and it's got a built-in imager. So if you want to sort of, you know, widen the stereo field a little bit, make some room for some other instruments. And the cool thing is you can actually choose which different parts of the EQ spectrum that you want to boost. So if, let's say, you're like, I don't want to boost the low end, I want to keep it centered, then you can do that. So if you want to maybe add a little bit more width to the high end or maybe to the high mids, you can do that. So I did some little bit of imaging widening for that. And then I got this vintage tape on here, just kind of playing around with it a little bit. It's very, you can't really tell too much of a difference with it, but. I don't know, it's kind of cool. It kind of adds a little like subtle vintagey analog sound to it. So with the maximizer, pretty much I just dropped the ceiling down a little bit just to avoid any clipping, and then I just brought the threshold down to the point where I got that commercial level that I was going for. And I'm still kind of learning Ozone 9 a little bit, but there is a lot of really awesome features with it, and we'll probably be talking about this more in a future video as well. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, definitely make sure to give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't, and hit the notification bell so you can catch all the videos as they drop. And if you want to learn more about Sonespheres 3 Current, definitely make sure to go to soundiron.com. It's still on sale as this video comes out, so definitely don't miss out because it's a really fun one to work with. So I want to thank you again so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.